The term civil service can refer to either a branch of governmental service in which individuals are employed on the basis of professional merit as proven by competitive examinations, or the body of employees in any government agency other than the military. A civil servant or public servant is a person in the public sector employed for a government department or agency. The extent of civil servants of a state as part of the civil service varies from country to country. In the United Kingdom, for instance, only Crown employees are referred to as civil servants whereas county or city employees are not. Many consider the study of civil service to be a part of the field of public administration. Workers in non-departmental public bodies may also be classed as civil servants for the purpose of statistics and possibly for their terms and conditions. Collectively a state's civil servants form its civil service or public service. An international civil servant or international staff member is a civilian employee that is employed by an intergovernmental organization. These international civil servants do not resort under any national legislation but are governed by an internal staff regulations. All disputes related to international civil service are brought before special tribunals created by these international organizations such as, for instance, the Administrative Tribunal of the ILO. Specific referral can be made to the International Civil Service Commission of the United Nations, an independent expert body established by the United Nations General Assembly. Its mandate is to regulate and coordinate the conditions of service of staff in the United Nations Common System, while promoting and maintaining high standards in the international civil service. History, early history. Administrative institutions usually grow out of the personal servants of high officials, as in the Roman Empire. This developed a complex administrative structure, which is outlined in the Notitia Dignitatum and the work of John Lydus, but as far as we know, appointments to it were made entirely by inheritance or patronage and not on merit, and it was also possible for officers to employ other people to carry out their official tasks but continue to draw their salary themselves. There are obvious parallels here with the early bureaucratic structures in modern states where again appointments depended on patronage and were often bought and sold. Civil service in China. An early meritocratic civil service was established in Imperial China with the implementation of imperial examinations. The imperial exam was designed to select the best administrative officials for the state's bureaucracy. This system had a huge influence on both society and culture in Imperial China and was directly responsible for the creation of a class of scholar bureaucrats irrespective of their family pedigree. Originally, appointments to the bureaucracy were based on the patronage of aristocrats. Emperor Wu of Han started an early form of the imperial examinations, transitioning from inheritance and patronage to merit, in which local officials would select candidates to take part in an examination of the Confucian classics. The system reached its apogee during the Song dynasty. In theory, the Chinese civil service system provided one of the major outlets for social mobility in Chinese society, although in practice, due to the time-consuming nature of the study, the examination was generally only taken by sons of the landed gentry. The examination tested the candidate's memorization of the 9 classics of Confucianism and his ability to compose poetry using fixed and traditional forms and calligraphy. In the late 19th century the system came under increasing internal dissatisfaction, and it was criticized as not reflecting the candidate's ability to govern well, and for giving precedence to style over content and originality of thought. The system was finally abolished by the Qing government in 1905, as part of a package of reforms. The Chinese system was often admired by European commentators from the 16th century onward. Modern civil service. In the 18th century, in response to economic changes and the growth of the British Empire, the bureaucracy of institutions such as the Office of Works and the Navy Board greatly expanded. Each had its own system, but in general, staff were appointed through patronage or outright purchase. By the 19th century, it became increasingly clear that these arrangements were falling short. In 1806, the Honourable East India Company established a college, the East India Company College, near London to train and examine administrators of the company's territories in India. Examinations for the Indian civil service, a term coined by the company, were introduced in 1829. British efforts at reform were influenced by the imperial examinations system and meritocratic system of China. Thomas Taylor Meadows, Britain's consul in Guangzhou, China, argued in his desultory Notes on the Government and People of China, published in 1847, that the long duration of the Chinese Empire is solely and altogether owing to the good government which consists in the advancement of men of talent and merit only, and that the British must reform their civil service by making the institution meritocratic. In 1853 the Chancellor of the Exchequer William Gladstone, commissioned Sir Stafford Northcote and Charles Trevelyan to look into the operation and organisation of the civil service. The Northcote-Trevelyan Report of 1854 made 4 principal recommendations: that recruitment should be on the basis of merit determined through competitive examination, that candidates should have a solid general education to enable interdepartmental transfers, that recruits should be graded into a hierarchy, and that promotion should be through achievement, rather than preferment, patronage or purchase. It also recommended a clear division between staff responsible for routine work, and those engaged in policy formulation and implementation in an administrative class. The report was well-timed, because bureaucratic chaos during the Crimean War was causing a clamour for the change. The report's conclusions were immediately implemented, and a permanent, unified and politically neutral civil service was introduced as Her Majesty's Civil Service. A Civil Service Commission was also set up in 1855 to oversee open recruitment and end patronage, and most of the other Northcote-Trevelyan recommendations were implemented over some years. The same model, the Imperial Civil Service, was implemented in British India from 1858, after the demise of the East India Company's rule in India through the Indian Rebellion of 1857, which came close to toppling British rule in the country. The Northcote-Trevelyan model remained essentially stable for 100 years. This was a tribute to its success in removing corruption, delivering public services, and responding effectively to political change. It also had a great international influence and was adapted by members of the Commonwealth. The Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act established a modern civil service in the United States, and by the turn of the 20th century almost all Western governments had implemented similar reforms. By countries: Australia, Brazil. Civil servants in Brazil, servidores públicos in Portuguese, are those working in the executive, legislative and judicial branches of the federal government, state government, municipal government and the government of Brasilia, including congressmen, senators, mayors, ministers, the President of the Republic, and workers in government-owned corporation. Career civil servants are hired only externally on the basis of entrance examinations known as concurso público in Portuguese, usually consisting of a written test. Also some posts may require physical tests or oral tests. The position according to the examination score is used for filling the vacancies. The entrance examination are conducted by several companies with a government mandate. The best known are CESPE, the FGV, ESAF, and the Sesquinrio Foundation. The labor laws and social insurance for civil servants are different from private workers. Even between government branches the law and insurance differ between them. The posts usually are ranked by titles, the most common are technician for high school literates and analyst for graduate literates. There's also high post ranks like auditor, fiscal, chief of police, prosecutor, judge, attorney, etc. Those titles may require a master's degree or doctorate. The law doesn't allow servants to upgrade or downgrade posts internally. If they want to do that they need to pass in another external entrance examination. Canada. Canada's federal public service comprises approximately 200 departments, agencies, commissions, boards, councils, and crown corporations. There are 423,781 active contributors to the federal public service, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and Canadian Forces pension plans. This represents about 2.3% of the Canadian workforce of 18.7 million. Each provincial government also has its own public service. In 2010, all provincial governments' public service were employing a total of more than 350,000 people. China. One of the oldest examples of a civil service based on meritocracy is the imperial bureaucracy of China, which can be traced as far back as the Qin dynasty. During the Han dynasty, the Xiaolian system of recommendation by superiors for appointments to office was established. In the areas of administration, especially the military, appointments were based solely on merit. After the fall of the Han dynasty, the Chinese bureaucracy regressed into a semi-merit system known as the nine-rank system. In this system, noble birthright became the most significant prerequisite for gaining access to more authoritative posts. This system was reversed during the short-lived Sui dynasty, which initiated a civil service bureaucracy recruited through written examinations and recommendation. The following Tang dynasty adopted the same measures for drafting officials, and decreasingly relied on aristocratic recommendations and more on promotion based on the results of written examinations. However, the civil service examinations were practiced on a much smaller scale in comparison to the stronger, centralized bureaucracy of the Song dynasty. In response to the regional military rule of Ieyashi and the loss of civil authority during the late Tang period and five dynasties, the Song emperors were eager to implement a system where civil officials would owe their social prestige to the central court and gain their salaries strictly from the central government. This ideal was not fully achieved since many scholar officials were affluent landowners and were engaged in many anonymous business affairs in an age of economic revolution in China. Nonetheless, gaining a degree through three levels of examination, prefectural exams, provincial exams, and the prestigious palace exams was a far more desirable goal in society than becoming a merchant. This was because the mercantile class was traditionally regarded with some disdain by the scholar official class. This class of state bureaucrats in the Song period were far less aristocratic than their Tang predecessors. The examinations were carefully structured in order to ensure that people of lesser means than what was available to candidates born into wealthy, landowning families were given a greater chance to pass the exams and obtain an official degree. This included the employment of a bureau of copyists who would rewrite all of the candidates' exams in order to mask their handwriting and thus prevent favoritism by graders of the exams who might otherwise recognize a candidate's handwriting. The advent of widespread printing in the Song period allowed many more examination candidates access to the Confucian texts whose mastery was required for passing the exams. France. The civil service in France is often incorrectly considered to include all government employees, including employees of public corporations, such as SNCF. Germany. The public service in Germany is run by 4.6 million employees as of 2011. Public servants are distinguished into three groups of occupational statuses: Arbeiter, Angestellte and Beamte. All three groups are employed by Paragraph Beschäftigt and as a Paragraph Öffentlichen Rechts, states, federal government etc. Arbeiter in public service serve mostly in low-skilled labor such as construction, waste collection or manual office work. In some cases, training is not obligatory. Angestellte work in technical, vocational and office work in a very large range of occupational fields. In most cases, they have received a training aside from the government prior to employment. Beamte are known for several centuries in German states, but became a standardized group in 1794. Soldiers other than conscriptive soldiers are not Beamte but have according rights. Judges and public attorneys are all Beamte, while professors are mostly Beamte. The group of Beamte have the most secure employment and are paid by a scheme of Besoldungsordnungen. It is prohibited for Beamte to take strike action. Arbeiter and Angestellte work with individual contracts, while Beamte are appointed, employed and removed by law. Greece. Controversies about the institution of the civil service in Greece are widespread. Typically, they concern the large numbers of public employees, the lack of adequate meritocracy in their employment, the strong ties that significant portions of public employees maintain with political parties and the clientelism that this relationship incubates, internal inequalities of wages among public employees, and inequalities of the high income of public employees relevant to that of private sector workers. The civil service pay scale is also controversial given the conditions before the financial crisis that made being a civil servant a dream job. India. In India, The civil service is defined as appointive positions by the government in connection with the affairs of the Union and includes a civilian in a defense service, except positions in the Indian Armed Forces. The members of civil service serve at the pleasure of the President of India, and Article 311 of the Constitution protects them from politically motivated or vindictive action. The civil services of India can be classified into two types, the All India Services and the Central Civil Services. The recruits are university graduates selected through a rigorous system of examinations, called the Civil Services Examination, and its technical counterpart known as the Engineering Services Examination, both conducted by the Union Public Service Commission. The entry into the state civil services is through a competitive examination conducted by every state public service commission. Senior positions in civil service are listed and named in the order of precedence of India. Ireland. The civil service of Ireland includes the employees of the Department of State as well as a small number of core state agencies such as the Office of the Revenue Commissioners, the Office of Public Works, and the Public Appointments Service. The organisation of the Irish civil service is very similar to the traditional organisation of the British Home Civil Service, and indeed the grading system in the Irish civil service is nearly identical to the traditional grading system of its British counterpart. In Ireland, public sector employees such as teachers or members of the country's police force, and Garda Síochána are not considered to be civil servants, but are rather described as public servants. Japan. Spain. Spanish. The civil service in Spain is usually considered to include all the employees at the different levels of the Spanish public administration, central government, autonomous communities, as well as municipalities. There are three main categories of Spanish public positions: temporary political posts, which require a simple procedure for hire and dismissal, is associated to top-level executives and advisors; statutory permanent posts, which require a formal procedure for access that usually involves a competition among candidates and whose tenants are subject to a special statutory relationship of work with their employers; and non-statutory permanent posts, which also require a formal procedure for entry similar to the procedure required for the funcionarios de carrera, but whose tenants are subject to normal working conditions and laws. Competitions differ notably among the state, the 17 autonomous communities and the city councils, and the funcionarios de carrera, and personal laboral examinations vary in difficulty from one location to another. As of 2011, there were 2.6 million civil servants in Spain. In December 2011, the government of Rajoy announced that civil servants have to serve a minimum 37.5 working hours per week regardless of their place or kind of service. United Kingdom. The civil service in the United Kingdom only includes Crown employees, not parliamentary employees or local government employees. Public sector employees such as those in education and the NHS are not considered to be civil servants. Police officers and staff are also not civil servants. Civil servants in the devolved government in Northern Ireland are not part of the Home Civil Service, but constitute the separate Northern Ireland Civil Service. Employees of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office are members of HM Diplomatic Service, which is associated with but separate from the Civil Service. United States. In the United States, the Civil Service was established in 1871. The Federal Civil Service is defined as all appointive positions in the executive, judicial, and legislative branches of the government of the United States, except positions in the uniformed services. In the early 19th century, government jobs were held at the pleasure of the president. A person could be fired at any time. The spoil system meant that jobs were used to support the political parties. This was changed in slow stages by the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act of 1883 and subsequent laws. By 1909, almost two-thirds of the U.S. federal workforce was appointed based on merit, that is, qualifications measured by tests. Certain senior civil service positions, including some heads of diplomatic missions and executive agencies, are filled by political appointees. Under the Hatch Act of 1939, civil servants are not allowed to engage in political activities while performing their duties. The U.S. Civil Service includes the competitive service and the accepted service. The majority of civil service appointments in the U.S. are made under the competitive service, but certain categories in the diplomatic service, the FBI, and other national security positions are made under the accepted service. U.S. state and local government entities often have competitive civil service systems that are modeled on the national system, in varying degrees. As of January 2007, the federal government, excluding the Postal Service, employed about 1.8 million civilian workers. The federal government is the nation's single largest employer. Although most federal agencies are based in the Washington, D.C. region, only about 16% of the federal government workforce is employed in this region. There are currently 15 federal executive branch agencies and hundreds of sub-agencies. European Union. The European Civil Service is the civil service serving the institutions of the European Union, of which the largest employer is the European Commission. Civil servants are recruited directly into the institutions after being selected by competitions set by EPSO, the official selection office. They are allocated to departments, known as Directorates General, each covering one or more related policy areas. See also, note, this is not a complete list of civil service topics in Wikipedia. For more options, enter a detailed topic in the Wikipedia search window, or use a search engine. Generally, Civil Service Commission, Civil Service Organization, Civil Service Examination, Civil Service Reform in Developing Countries, Civil Service Reform Act, Civil Service Reform Act of 1978, Civil Service Restoration Act, Public Service, by region. Note, also see specific countries listed in the articles on Civil Service, Civil Service Commission, Civil Service Reform in Developing Countries, North America, Civil Service in the United States, Civil Service Commission, Minister responsible for the Civil Service, South America, Civil Service in Brazil. Europe, Civil Service of the European Union, Civil Service of the United Kingdom, Civil Service Commissioners, Civil Service Commission, Civil Service of Ireland, Civil Service of the Republic of Ireland, Civil Service of Germany, Asia, Civil Service in early India, Civil Services of India, Civil Services of Pakistan, Civil Services of Tamil Nadu, Civil Service of Singapore, Civil Service in Malaysia, Civil Service of the People's Republic of China, Civil Service of Japan, Civil Service Commission, Africa, Civil Service Commission of Nigeria, Civil Service Pay and Benefits, Civil Service Retirement System, Merit Pay, Performance-Related Pay, Pay for Performance, which includes Pay for Performance, a system of employee payment in the United States that links compensation to measures of work quality or goals. Pay for Performance, an emerging movement in health insurance in Britain and the United States, in which providers are rewarded for quality of healthcare services. Pay for Performance, proposed and implemented systems of incentive pay based on job performance metrics. Pay for Play, money is exchanged for services. Performance-Related Pay, Incentive Program, Veterans Health Administration Scandal of 2014, references. Further reading, Albro, M., Bureaucracy, Armstrong, J. A., The European Administrative Elite, Bod. D., Chinese Ideas in the West, Brownlow, Louis, Charles E. Merriam, and Luther Gulick, Report of the President's Committee on Administrative Management, Duguay, P., In Praise of Bureaucracy, Weber, Organization, Ethics, Duguay, P., ed., The Values of Bureaucracy, Hugenboom, R.E., Outlawing the Spoils, A History of the Civil Service Reform Movement, 1865–1883. Mathur, P.N., The Civil Service of India, 1731–1894, A Study of the History, Evolution and Demand for Reform, Schisl, Martin, The Politics of Efficiency, Municipal Administration and Reform in America, 1880–1920. Sullivan, Siri, Literature in the Public Service, Sublime Bureaucracy, Theakston, Kevin, The Civil Service Since 1945, Van Riper, Paul. History of the United States Civil Service. White, Leonard D., Introduction to the Study of Public Administration. White, Leonard D., Charles H. Bland, Walter R. Sharp, and Fritz Morstein Marx. Civil service abroad, Great Britain, Canada, France, Germany online, external links, the UK Civil Service, official site, UK Civil Service, Constitution, Behaviour and Reform, Indian Civil Service, www.publicservice.co.uk, Public Sector News and Features, Brazilian Civil Servants, a Civil Service. New International Encyclopedia 1905a.